Welcome back, fellow folklorists, to GRIMM, Digital Folklore, where GRIMM and I take a look at the history and folklore behind some of your favorite games. It's Halloween, and surprisingly, GRIMM actually requested that we cover a topic for once. What would you like for us to cover, GRIMM? Five Nights at Freddy's, huh? Why am I not surprised about that? Yes, I know it's a very popular series, I just worry this is going to turn out like that time I let you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey and you locked me out of the house for 2 days. Why do I feel like I've heard that story before? Fortunately for you, Scott Cawthon was kind enough to just update FNAF VR for Halloween, so now is as good a time as any, but you better behave yourself, GRIMM. Anyway, I'm sure by now that many of you are familiar with the story of Chuck E. Cheese, the Rockfire explosion, and how they became the influence for Freddy Fazbear's and Circus Baby's Pizza World respectively, so I'm not going to focus on that too much here. Instead, I would like to focus on two other underlying influences behind FNAF's terrifying premise: the innate fear and folklore that exists behind robots, and how modern-day folklore created the basis upon which Five Nights at Freddy's is built. Let's start with the historical side of things first. I'm sure many of you are aware of folklore involving animated beings similar to robots, and the early creations that actually go back much further than you may expect. But the real extent of these goes even further to some of the earliest myths we know of. The earliest tales of robotic beings come to us from 3 different locations: Egypt, Greece, and China. Egypt seems to present us with the earliest concepts in the form of animated statues. This is because they held the belief that statues were capable of holding the ka of a being. The ka was a concept from Egyptian mythology that is roughly akin to a soul, but would probably be better depicted as a being's life force. However, ka was not a concept that was unique to humans. The ka of Egyptian deities could also inhabit statues made in their likeness. It was believed that this ka could even use the statues to communicate directly with our world, with one such communication supposedly providing the basis for Pharaoh Hatshepsut's expedition to the land of the gods. While a very early example, this does show that from some of our earliest civilizations, our ancestors recognized a strange kind of connection and power behind figures which resembled animated beings. One of the next examples of early robots in folklore comes to us from China and is recorded in the Lei Tzu, a Chinese Taoist text of unknown origin. In it, it tells the tale of an inventor who presents an invention of his to King Mu of the Zhou dynasty. The invention was a machine that seemed to look like a man. It walked in long strides while moving its head in a fashion that made it look almost human to the observers. When the inventor touched its chin, it sang in key. When he touched the chin again, it began gesturing in time. The performance impressed the king and his harem until it began acting as if it was flirting with the king's favorite concubine. The king became enraged until the inventor quickly tore it apart to show that it was merely made of wood, leather, and metal. Once more, even in the earliest history of automatons, we find our ancestors treating these simulacra as if they were something more than objects. The last of our early examples of robots come from ancient Greece, where we have a number of tales that involve inhuman machines which animate and behave like humans. The god of the forge, Hephaestus, was said to have been involved in the creation of a number of such beings. From tables that could move around on their own, to talking mechanical handmaidens and more. Perhaps the best known example of a robot from ancient Greece, though, involves Talos, the bronze man that was made to defend Crete. He was said to have a single vein running down his back that ended at his ankle and held in the molten metal which gave him life. He would defend Crete by picking up and throwing giant boulders at approaching ships. If any managed to reach shore, they would meet a worse demise, as he would heat his own body until he was glowing red and would hold them in a scorching, deadly embrace. In a morbid twist, Talos was even said to show some more of his human side after killing someone in this awful manner, as some accounts claim that afterwards he could be heard letting out slow, deep laughter. This type of story is repeated a number of times throughout history. Whether they are grown from the ground, carved from stone, or molded from clay, it seems that as long as man has existed, we have recognized just how useful having unfeeling, tireless counterparts could be, as well as just how terrifying it could be to have such beings turned against us. Of course, now we know that many of these feelings of unease that come alongside automatons are actually representative of the idea that we now commonly call the Uncanny Valley. We still don't fully understand all of the reasoning behind this phenomenon, but we do know that it is instinctual and has been exhibited by other species as well. Essentially, though, the Uncanny Valley serves as a way for us to protect ourselves. As something becomes more human, we start to notice the differences between us more than the similarities. This was something that allowed our primitive ancestors to recognize signs of disease or illness in others, as we noticed them acting strange or different from usual, and the movement of many animatronics falls well within this category. Their jerky, unnatural movements, the way they only seem to react to certain stimulus, almost all of this would be indicative of some kind of potentially contagious or deadly neurological disorder, and so it sets off alarms unconsciously in our minds. One key detail about this phenomenon in particular, though, was instrumental in leading up to the creation of Chuck E. Cheese and subsequently Five Nights at Freddy's. You see, the Uncanny Valley is not a clearly defined phenomenon. Instead, it's incredibly subjective, and the response a particular subject creates varies depending on the individual. For instance, some creations which many view as relatively tame and friendly, such as C-3PO in Star Wars, can be seen as creepy or off to others. Even more polarizing examples, such as Tom Hanks in the Polar Express, while rightly terrifying to many of us, can be viewed by others with little reaction. Why is this aspect so important, though? Well, this varied reaction to animated creations explains why so many people seem perfectly fine with pizza places installing animatronic mascots, while the rest of us were rightfully terrified of the jerky, unfeeling abominations that were watching us eat pizza while we just wanted to celebrate our friend Timmy's birthday party. Sorry about that. But this terrified minority is important because they are the ones who ultimately set the stage for the success of Five Nights at Freddy's. These scared children are the ones who started to tell stories about the animatronics from their favorite pizza places that had disturbed them so much, creating a new series of urban legends. None of these stories had much impact. I doubt there are any that became too well established at the time, but they were very widespread. I think it's fairly safe to say that almost everyone over a certain age knew someone who had a friend of a friend or a distant cousin who had a story involving a creepy experience with the animatronics at a local pizza place. These stories and experiences lingered in the back of our minds until they were ultimately given new life by Scott Cawthon with the creation of the first Five Nights at Freddy's. Suddenly, one of the worst collective nightmares from our childhoods came true in this game as these terrifying animatronics started to move all on their own. If this had been the extent of it, though, Five Nights would have been a popular but likely short-lived horror series based only on nostalgia. Instead, something happened that I doubt anyone over a certain age would have expected. A younger generation was introduced to this series, and unlike those of us who had all too fresh memories of those janky animatronics, they had no innate fear of these mascots, at least not in the same way we did. Instead, this game, which was at least unnerving to the older generations who could still remember the original mascots, didn't have that effect on children. Now don't get me wrong, it's a scary game regardless of age, but the way the first game is designed actually makes it a fairly accessible game for children. Children who then went on to tell their friends and classmates about the game as well. This, combined with the fact that Cawthon told the story of the game in pieces in a way that naturally draws us in and piques our curiosity, led to a whole new generation being introduced to these kinds of tales. Suddenly, people again cared about these fading pizza franchises full of broken animatronics. In the most surprising way, this franchise was able to take advantage of our own fears and folklore in multiple different ways, and the result was beyond anyone's expectations. Children, new to this kind of horror, had questions and wanted to know more about the details behind this game. Meanwhile, their older siblings and parents had some answers and stories of their own to tell involving their own experiences with the real thing. Finally, behind it all, this series continues to play off of our own dread and paranoia that has existed within our minds since our earliest civilizations. All of this combined in a perfect storm to set the stage for Five Nights at Freddy's popularity, and just in time, too. As technology continues to advance, animatronics will manage to become more and more realistic. Already we have proven capable of making animatronics that are so real as to appear lifelike. But Five Nights at Freddy's has already firmly cemented its place in the back of our minds. No matter how wonderful the robotics of the future prove to be, our society will always remember the terror we feel at the thought of being a child again, alone in that run-down pizza place with the rotting mascots that refuse to be forgotten. That covers just about everything regarding Five Nights at Freddy's and its place in our own modern folklore. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to let me know in the comments below, as well as if there are any other similar topics you would like me to cover in the future. As always, please be sure to like and subscribe or follow me on Twitter to stay up to date with my most recent videos. And Grimm and I would like to wish everyone a happy... Wait, where's Grimm? Oh god, this is the Terminator debacle all over again. Well, I would like to make sure to wish everyone a happy and safe Halloween, and I will hopefully see you all next time. Until then, fellow... Ah!